here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Cranack.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it. Weekend Edition is back. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Mark Cranack, Elijah Herbal, as we buckle in for 2021. Happy New Year. Best of holidays to you, and a cheers and tip of the glass to a better 2021. A lot of college football to get into. How about the Ohio State doing their job last night against Clemson? We'll hear from Dabo and from Sunshine, the quarterback, who had a tough night last night for Clemson. Trevor Lawrence, incredible ball player, but man, oh man, that was a different-looking Ohio State team. Ooh. And
especially, right?
Oh, they were flying around. They were getting after the quarterback. I mean, them silver bullets looked, dare I say, vintage from a season ago. Some thoughts on Nebraska football with the transfer portal, who's coming on back, who is heading on down the road for Nebraska football 2021. We'll hear from Coach Hoiberg because we're all excited about this 0-3 matchup of Nebraska basketball against 0-3 Michigan State in conference play. That tips tonight at PBA, as Nebraska basketball has become very difficult to watch. But Hoiberg's got his identity, right? I mean, it's going to be space, pace, and let's launch the three. That is the identity Nebraska's trying to forge. It has not worked out, though, thus far, as Nebraska football, contrastly, continues to search for their identity. Take some of your phone calls if you want to jump in this morning. Numbers to dial up: 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Can email Chris at hailvarsity.com, Mark at hailvarsity.com, and find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, at Mark Skurs, at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbal. Next hour, we'll hear from Brandon Vogel. I haven't talked to Vogues for a while, so we'll get the managing editor from Hail Varsity. .com and magazine in. A great sit-down with HailVarsity.com and Bill Moose you need to check out on expectations for 2021 for Nebraska football. And our dear friend, the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp, will be with us at 8:30. And another friend of the show, Cranack, on cue last night on Twitter. Big old Husker fan down in Alabama. Lars Anderson's been with us a number of times over the years.
Yeah.
And Lars's tweet last night, I'm going to say this, Ohio State football, you would not be playing Alabama for the national championship if it wasn't for one team and their kick-ass passionate fans. Go Big Red. Lars at 10:30 last night on Twitter, again giving the tip of the cap to Nebraska football. Last night, and I don't know if you're to the point as a member of the Big Ten, as a Nebraska fan, where you cheer for your league, like, dare I say, the SEC does. But that felt good last night based on your inability as a Nebraska program right now to navigate successfully through the Big Ten in football. You're working towards it. We all get that. And, man, Ohio State looked as good as advertised. You feel great for those kids that they got to play ball. And, man, they've been waiting a whole year for some payback, Cranack, and they delivered it and then some. Ohio State looked like Ohio State was supposed to look like, and they did it on the biggest stage last night. Offense, defense, Mr. Parker running the football, or I should say Sermon. He was preaching loud and proud with the run game, and great job by Ohio State. I thought they could hang around. I didn't think they'd win. They won convincingly, as did Alabama, who looks different level against a really good football team in Notre Dame.
Yeah, and it's funny, going into that game now, you kind of look at Alabama and Ohio State and you think that it kind of belies their history and their reputation. But I mean, that's got track meet written all over it now.
It does, which
Right?
means the unders will hit, right?
Right. I mean, the loser could put up 35 or 40 in that game, which is it's very weird to say. And who knows? Maybe by the time you get, that's like January
11th, the week from Monday.
So, I mean, look, you give these guys a week and a half to figure each other out. Maybe that'll kind of mute the scoring a little bit. But, God, just in terms of the weapons you have on the outside, and I don't know about you, but I am so impressed with Mac Jones, too.
Oh, yeah. Bama's quarterback's great.
Oh, but you kind of hear sometimes he's just he's system guy. Well, anybody could put up numbers with those receivers. Like, yeah, it helps. It helps to have those.
Look
guys,
at who he's had to follow at Bama. I mean, he's had to follow. Yeah, he's had to follow Hurts. He's had to follow Tua, and he's been nice. He's incredible. I interrupted you. Forgive me there, but he makes it go.
Deadly.
He's got great weapons, but he makes it go. He's
deadly. I mean, he is deadly accurate. He moves in the pocket really well. And you see, to bring it back to Nebraska, but you see what Nebraska's missing. Right? And you see just the ability to chuck it down, to take some shots and connect on a few of them, for crying out loud. And when you do, you're scoring more touchdowns. And I mean, Nebraska just didn't connect on any of those, like hardly at all the entire year. And it's so limiting for your offense. And you just see when you are able to take some shots, when you're able to convert a couple, just everything opens up and the game becomes so much easier. And case in point is Ohio State and Alabama. The way they play right now, that's essentially it, isn't it? Like
they have a fantastic offensive line. Yes. They are able to run the football. And then what made Fields so great last night was his play action. And you saw game 1 against Nebraska with the cushion, right? Everyone's bitching and moaning. Why is Nebraska playing 15 yards off the Well, Clemson's fellas in the secondary had no answer. You get sucked up on play action. Yeah. And bang, it's over the top for another 50-yard hit, right? And same with Alabama. You get beat to death by their incredible running game. And that hurdle by Najee was just filthy, where he's, you're not supposed to be able to run for 40 more yards after, navigating a live hurdle of a Notre Dame player along the sidelines, right? Where he clears 7 feet with the jump as he gets to the outside. The run game makes the pass game go. And, man, we've been screaming all year about Nebraska's inability to get downfield. Now, you saw a little snippet of that with Wandale on a wheel route on a cold night in New Jersey to end the year. But
the fact that you have to summon up that, like, there was that one play.
There's that one play.
That one time, and we all remember, yeah. I remember that.
It can happen.
I mean, jeez. Like, that's what we have to summon up is that one play, that one time against Rutgers. Yeah, look, Nebraska's got a ways to go to be Alabama and Ohio State.
Let's get to 500 and be
right.
Truly bowl eligible. And I know that's not what you want to hear.
Bowl, if that's still a thing.
I don't know that it is, but as we bring it back to Nebraska, I mean, you think about field position, you think about turnover margin, you think about Nebraska on offense, and even you're watching Northwestern do their thing. How well their defense played against Auburn. And, Auburn and Georgia and the rest of the SEC teams, their motivation is not an excuse. And they tend not to be as dominant anymore, aside from the top-tier SEC teams. But, it's been a pretty good run by Big Ten teams just outside the college football New Year's Day 6, okay, where you have Northwestern taken down and on paper, and this is not knocking Northwestern at all. They played great yesterday. But Northwestern's now another team in a long line of Big Ten teams that were probably second or third, right, in the league. You could, I mean, based on losing the Big Ten championship game, that was your runner-up. Indiana may have something to say about that as far as their quality. But you have an Auburn win this year, win by Northwestern this year. You have Minnesota beat a really good Auburn team last year again on a New Year's Day bowl, and Auburn's been the team again. If you think about Wisconsin a few years back when they got their breakthrough to kind of cap off a really good season where they were at 9-2 or 9-3, do they go get an SEC type victory type pelt to put on the Big Ten wall? And Wisconsin kind of got that kicked off. So, I mean, even the rest of the group that's behind Ohio State has fared very well in some of their contests. Now, it's a matter of time for Nebraska to get in that direction. And Cranack, it all really kind of hinges on who's coming back, who's heading off into the sunset, and time will tell. We know DeCap is off to the NFL. We know Stoll is off to the NFL. There's still no decision officially on a guy like Honus, although I have heard that he had some repair work done, and I think he'll probably be back. Yep. Which is outstanding. A guy like Stilley, does he give it the sixth year? And because he was playing really good football. JoJo Doman, I can't imagine Nebraska's defense being as effective as it needs to be without him. Is just versatile and good, and how sure of a tackler he's become.
I thought he was Nebraska's best defensive player.
I don't disagree with you, too. I think Cam Taylor-Britt's right up there for discussion. I think Cam's going to get his NFL grade back, and, best case, probably third round, but probably that third through fifth round window, okay? But I think Cam's going to be like, damn it, I'm a first-round guy or a second-round guy, so does he make the decision to go? Because the rookie minimum jumps up this year. So you get drafted, your rookie minimum's really nice. You still got to make the squad, obviously, and you're not guaranteed to do that fourth round or beyond in all likelihood. Not that he wouldn't, but just looking at numbers, right? So does he come back and anchor a secondary where he may or may not have his two safeties back, or he may be breaking in two? But, the bright spot for Nebraska in 2020 was their defense. And, yes, I know the Illinois game happened. But overall, I mean, you saw Nebraska do their job, do it well with that front seven and in the secondary in a lot of the games. I mean, Nebraska's was in every game they played this year. And Nebraska's defense kept Nebraska football in about every game they played this year. It's about complementary football and what can you get worked out offensively. That's and special teams. I mean, we kind of outlined the field position, the turnover margin, the kicking, and of course what you're getting from your offense here. So you're not putting the defense. I mean, a lot of the times when the defense allowed some major outbreaks or some drives that couldn't happen, it was after either a turnover, a short field, a horrific punt, or there was just a return set up where Nebraska didn't cover it like they needed to. I mean, I don't recall too many just flat out 80 or 90 yard drives on the Nebraska defense. They may get some points off of an extended drive, but overall, it wasn't like you just ran it down or threw it down Nebraska's throat last year defensively. So, the offense has got to get rolling. That's completely obvious. And from a head coaching perspective, I think, you've got Scott Frost that has taken an extended look in the mirror with just what he needs to do with his duties as head coach. They've recruited extremely well, all right? You need to retain some of that talent. You need to continue to develop some of that talent. And then you need to continue to make adjustments with what I want to do, back to the identity part. What am I bringing in at running back, right? Because I think we can all look and say, okay, I think there's decent offensive line play this last season at times when you committed to it, right? And I think that they have some more pops when I think of some of the talent that was redshirting or saw the field this year, and more linemen coming in with this recruiting class, I think they're going to be fine at offensive line. Do you have a Big Ten running back? I mean, do you have a guy that, okay, if Mills moves on at the age of 24, you can turn to? And maybe the answer is yes, no one's seen it, okay? Can you get a guy developed between spring and into this upcoming fall camp to be the guy who can carry it? And are you willing to commit to carrying the football in your run game with the same guy for 20 to 25 totes versus your quarterback carrying it up to almost 20 times a game is what it felt like the average was. So I'm all good for the quarterback, I-back, 1-2 punch carrying the football, but it can't be so lopsided with the quarterback. I'm interested too, from the receiving standpoint. You get another year to work together and get things figured out with Adrian as your quarterback. Figure out what you're going to do with Luke McCaffrey. Let's get Betts a few more plays, right? Alante Brown. I mean, there are still some weapons. You got Nixon that's recovering from injury. You got Wandale. So, I mean, the pieces are there. You've just got to be better at it. You got to be better at delegating. You got to be better at communicating. And they've got to be better at developing. And that's your job as you embrace this CEO role. Truly, year 4 as head coach going into a murderous schedule.
Is he going to, though, right? Is he going to embrace the CEO role?
He has to. I mean, I think if push comes to shove.
But is he going to?
I think there's enough people Scott Frost cares to hear from that have probably given this, okay?
Yeah,
if you have enough of the same message, dude, what's up with your guys' communication? I mean, right? We hit on why is the punter kicking it to Crookshank again, right? That's the example that's still burned into our mind. Well, he wasn't supposed to. Well, the game of telephone can't happen on college football Saturdays, all right, when it comes to communication. Here's what we're doing. I'm the head coach. Here's what we're doing. Special teams analyst. Who are you talking to that actually can coach on the field? Those that are coaching on the field, please communicate that to whoever's kicking the football. Yes, get it out of the end zone. And yes, kick it out of the end zone when you got a guy like Crookshank back there. I mean, from a special team standpoint, that's the game of telephone where somebody didn't execute it or didn't get the message.
Well, there's that. And then do you remember this year coming into the year when there was some talk, Greg Austin, the offensive line coach, kind of calling out, I wouldn't say he's calling out Frost, but he was basically saying, look, if you want to get the run game established, then you have to call those runs. Mm-hmm. Like we aren't calling the runs to establish a run game. You wonder if this year, because look, I think there were times when they did try to call runs, and that it was getting stuffed
because they had an extra box. Because there was no an extra guy in the box. They had no respect for Nebraska's passing threat.
That's as part of it, but it's also, I think, you're going against Northwestern's defense.
Sure,
which is
you're great.
You're maybe a little too quick to abandon it.
Sure, that could be a
fair. Part of it too.
That's fair.
So that's. And you mentioned communication. I think that's across the board too. Is they need to figure out what Frost has said some things where he's made these kind of bolder proclamations that play really well on social media. I know that's not why he's doing it, but things like, hey, we'll never scream down a kid. We'll always just love up on him and support him. We're about no fear of failure and having a big desire to succeed. Mm-hmm. Like you'll see, he says a lot of these things, and philosophically they make sense, but are you really about it? That's one thing that I'm watching that I'm just sort of like, I just see some mismatches there with what's being said, what's being proclaimed, and then what's actually happening. Another one of those things is it's competition every week, competition at every single position. Competition. Okay, then why are you passing on Burrow, dude? Like, honestly. And I know that's old school. I'm bringing up, 2 years ago stuff. But really, if you're really about the competition, like, why are you passing on? What, really? Bring him in. Let him compete. See what happens. And then you go into the no fear of failure. Well, why are you fair catching kicks? I mean, I can tell that when the team is returning a ball, they're not doing very well. I understand that. I understand that your kick return game is not very good. But when you're about no fear of failure and you're fair catching kickoffs, you see how those things are at odds?
Oh,
right?
There's so much at odds, and I'm not saying the entire program's at odds, but you gotta do what you say. You can't say one thing and do another in instances. And I think, don't kid yourself, some indecision or some different decisions probably helped play a large role with some of the guys that were putting their hand up or keeping their hand down with who wants to go to a bowl game. I mean, there was exhaustion, and we can only imagine with this ups and downs and, hey, we're going to play, hey, we're not going to play, hey, you're in quarantine /bubble, just embrace it because you love football, and you'll finally get to play, and then you don't get the results you want. And, you need to have a uniform message for several things, right? That means you're going to practice. That means you're going to go to class. That means there's going to be competition, and everybody's held to that standard. And if somebody's not following suit, it's the locker room's job to get somebody in line, right? And there needs to be acceptance once you enter that locker room, that if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, someone calls you out for it. You need to hear that teammate and fall in line or be gone, right? I mean, it comes down to, I think that is a reality where I think you're having some guys that get to the program from different parts of the country that are super uber talented, and they probably haven't had to work real hard at being great because they are just freak athletes and they're special. But there needs to be the reality that no one's special, okay?
Yeah.
No one's special once you walk in this facility. And for years, it's different strokes for different folks based on someone's personality. We've heard Coach Kaz talk about, I could get after Malik Collins, but I can't get after him the same way. I'd have to be different with Vincent Valentine, right? Different personalities. So there is going to be a bit of that. But, yeah, at some point, it's okay to scream at a kid. And it's okay for a teammate to scream at another teammate. I mean, there needs to be that availability within the culture of a locker room because it's life. I mean, eventually you've had enough of the same mistakes, and you got to unleash the fury on somebody or replace that person.
That's why I didn't have a problem with Scott Frost leaving it up to the team about whether they're going to continue the season, whether they would accept a bowl bid. He essentially left it up to them. And look, they'd had enough. Yeah, there were enough people on the squad that said they had enough. I do wonder the percentage of those people who are actually going to be back next year, though. Right.
And maybe if you were to tweak it in the future,
yeah,
those that are coming back should have had the voice.
Well, maybe, right? But I'm actually okay with him leaving it up to, because that is one thing that I have been happy with. That I think that there is some consistency in message there, where he's just saying, hey, the best teams are player led, right? And you can agree or disagree. There's different ways to do it, but I agree with that thought. And he left it up to them, left it up to the players. And there was a vote, and there was probably some internal strife about it. Some guys really wanting to play, some guys really wanting not to. And then some guys probably leaving the program, like voting against it, and then now actually not even coming back. Right. But there's probably a handful that are coming back. So how is that going to be dealt with internally? Right. And it's like the coaches are going to reprimand anybody. That's a locker room thing. That's a player led thing. What do you want to be about? Team. Right. I think that's Frost asking those guys. He's okay. Players, team. That's lifting 13 months out of 12. That's working out constantly. That is eating salads for breakfast and like doing whatever you have to do to get on the field. What do you want to be about? Right. He's leaving it up to them. And look, I'm okay with that part. I think that part's fine. And look, you're in a conference too as we're seeing, you're in a conference too, man, where, look, you got to come correct now. Even if you're not, you don't have to be elite necessarily, but you better be elite when it comes to details. Like, you know what I mean? You better know how to cover a kick. You better know how to return a kick competently. You better know how to, I don't know, not commit 10 penalties. You better know how to throw a ball like downfield. Right?
Well, here's my thing, and we'll hear from Fred.
You know how not to have delay of games and procedure penalties.
Exactly.
Like you got to play clean.
There's no crowd. I mean, there's no one to force you to jump off sides. And when it comes to addressing these issues, how's it going in practice? Right? Are you seeing this in practice? And if there is a mistake in practice, are you pulling the old Carl Pelini, run it again? I mean, right? Are you stopping and starting over, or are you correcting later on during meetings when you're watching film?
Now, you just hit on something, and now we're not there. Disclaimer, we are not there.
No, we have not
at practice. But
despite our best effort and the amount of camouflage Elijah Herbal has in his closet to sneak in and want to be there in the room.
That is the report, though, right? That was the report.
It's about fast practices in the morning. Get your work in, get your work done. I get it.
Yeah,
but how are you correcting?
This is what we have to go off of, right? This was Frost, I think, when he first got hired, where he talked about the practice style being, we don't really correct in the moment. We move on. We correct it later in the film room. So a mistake happens. It's like, okay, big deal. Go, move on. Next, go. So it's about pace. You don't correct in the moment. That does make me want. Now, I don't know if they're still doing that, but if they are still doing that, is that maybe something to look at? Right? Is that something to look at where it's like, maybe you spend 2.5.
Maybe you spend 2.5 hours. Hold on. Yeah.
Like there aren't consequences for major mistakes that end up upending drives, right? Like, is that part of it? Who knows? We don't know for sure, but something's way off, right? There's no question about that. There's something that is very amiss, and is it the fit? Is it Frost applying a style of go fast, where he had the personnel at Oregon? Obviously, he had a whole culture that was accustomed to doing that. And then applying it to Central Florida, where it's like, hey, lo and behold, you just had personnel that was pretty damn similar. And they didn't have the culture part down yet, but personnel-wise, you had a lot of freaking speed on that team. You don't necessarily have that here. And you were also going against defenses that, tackling is kind of optional in Pac-12 and the AAC, right? Except for like the top one or two programs, like tackling that's not what they're about. Now you're in a conference where like defense is taken very seriously by pretty much every program. You don't necessarily have that speed, and you're still applying what you knew at Oregon and UCF to this situation. And is that a misfit?
Does it translate? Well, the search for that identity, and you have a backup go-to if what you want to do can't be done or isn't working. That's on the to-do list for Nebraska football, and that is an issue for Nebraska basketball. We'll hear from Coach Hoiberg next, weekend edition, Hail Varsity Radio, back with you for another year. Happy New Year. Chris Schmidt, Mark Kranak, Elijah Herbal. We'll step aside, and some of Coach Hoiberg's presser from yesterday as we gear up for a 2021 full of football, hoops, baseball, all things Nebraska. And we'll hear from the mayor coming up on Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Now back with Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery, with Chris Schmidt and Mark Kranak.
We're here with Coach Hoiberg. I'll start with Robin Washut.
Hey, Fred, with the problems your team is having shooting right now, how do you balance adjusting to fix what they're struggling with while also like still doing what you want to do offensively? More specifically, like, have you considered at all slowing things down, maybe reducing the tempo to try and have more set plays to create even higher percentage looks? Or are you just going to kind of ride this thing out and continue to have that identity that you ultimately want?
Yeah, well, first of all, Happy New Year to all you guys. Hope everybody's doing well. As far as we've talked about it, absolutely. You look at our numbers, obviously we're not shooting the ball very well. We're not shooting it well at all right now, and assist to turnover for the year is basically 1-to-1, and that's just not good enough. That's not going to win many games when you're shooting the ball like we are and turning the ball over like we are with low assist totals. So we've talked about putting in a whole new set, a simple set that has more structure to it and more control on who we get the ball to. That all being said, we had 19 open threes, what we consider open shots from the three-point line in the last game, and we made 4 of them. We had 7 that we consider semi-contested, meaning a late contest, and a couple of the guys we had shooting them, we like those guys shooting the ball. So, to me, this game is so much about confidence. When you have it, you're on top of the world. When you don't, that rim looks like a little thimble up there, and that's what it looks like to a lot of our guys right now. Again, I've talked about the work ethic of our players. They come in, they'll all be in tonight to get extra looks, extra shots, and it's all about hopefully having a game where we see it go in the hole, and that all of a sudden changes the mindset of our players and completely flips the confidence. A lot of it with our guys are playing with low confidence right now. So we just, sometimes it's as simple as that, Robin. You got to find a way to put that thing in the hole, get it behind you, understand you can do it, you see it happen, and then you're off and running. And hopefully we start making them soon. But yes, as far as to answer your initial question, we've talked a lot about that. But at the same time, when you create 19 open threes, you got to knock them down. You got to be able to find a way to stay mentally tough if you've missed a couple and have the attitude that you're going to knock the next one down.
Steve Sipple?
Sometimes you need to get away from the kids for grown-up time, or get away from the grown-ups for kid time.
Happy New Year, Fred. Kind of going off of Robin's question, if the threes aren't falling, what becomes most important in your offense to sort of compensate for those threes not falling?
Well, obviously we don't have a big post threat right now that we can throw the ball to when we're not making our threes. Even on the rim, the rim rolls on our pick and roll where we get it into the paint. Some of that's leading to open threes. Some of it's leading to plays at the rim. The other, we were 8 for 19 at the rim. Again, when you miss threes like we did, and you're not finishing at a very high percentage at the rim, that's not a very good recipe. You're going to score, in the low 50s, which we've done the last 2 games, and you're not going to win many ball games. We get our paint touches a lot of times with the roll man. We've got a guy in Derek that's got one more game to sit, who is arguably our best finisher in the paint. Teddy's a guy that we can throw it to, but he's been settling a little bit lately off the block as opposed to trying to get deep position. Delano's a guy that we need to get it to more within the flow of our offense in the post. So we've got a few things, that we can get it down there. Now it's about making the right decision, and it's about finishing. But when you don't shoot well and you don't finish well, you're going to struggle to score.
So based on what you've said, you've had open shots, you've had shots at the rim. Is there danger in your shoes of overreacting to a loss like what occurred at Ohio State?
I mean, that's the other thing. The knee-jerk reaction to a butt kicking is, okay, we got to change everything we're doing. And, I know everybody goes through that when you have a performance like we did the other night. To me, the thing that really bothered me about last game is we quit defending. We quit, going out there and trying to match their physicality. And that's when the thing just blew open. We had a stretch. It was a 12-point game. We missed a layup, missed the putback, missed the front end of a 1-and-1, and missed a wide open, one of those where you can eat a sandwich and then shoot it, threes, and all of a sudden now it could have been 5. We had 3 good stops in a row, and then ultimately, after not seeing that thing go through the hoop, the human nature is you don't have the same energy defensively. We have to keep our defensive energy. That's kept us in games where we haven't shot well. It kept us in the Michigan game. It kept us in the Wisconsin game for the most part. It kept us in for a big portion of the Creighton game. The last game was the first time I really thought the energy was not where it needed to be able to compete in a Big Ten game against a ranked team. And that's what we're going to face all year. And, this group has been pretty resilient for the most part on that end of the floor. We just got to find a way to manufacture some offense and make some shots. Thank you.
Sam McEwen?
I guess I'll ask about Michigan State. I mean, what's wrong with them? Because they're not the team that we would have expected to see this year. They've lost 2 games by more than 25 points. So what are you seeing on tape, and what team do you think is going to come in? I know you know a little bit more about them than you would other teams because your son's on it.
Yeah, they're coming off a very similar performance to what we are with the game at Minnesota. And, I know one thing, with having a week to prepare, I can promise you what they have been going through probably isn't real easy and isn't a lot of fun. But, I know looking at Izzo's past, they lost 3 in a row last year at one point, and then they got it right, and they were one of the best teams in the country at the end of the year. You also understand they lost a really close game to Wisconsin. They lost a really close game to Northwestern, and then they lost handily to Minnesota. And that's what our league is. Our league is so good, you have to be on point every time you step on the floor to have a chance to win. And, coming off, a week, and the other thing is you get rid of, arguably the best point guard in the country last year in Cassius Winston, Xavier Tillman, who was the heart and soul of that team, a big part of their Final Four run, both those guys the year before. And, now you're trying to plug in pieces and players without much of a summer, without much of a fall, and then you lose 5 non-conference games. So, they're working some of their stuff out on the fly like we are. And that's just the reality when you have as many new faces without a lot of the early season opportunities that you would normally get to work out the kinks. So, it's for them, they're going to be right there at the end. They always are. And they generally go through a stretch like this. They have the last couple of years when they've been one of the best in the nation at the end of the season. They've also had some big wins. I mean, you look at some of those early season wins that they had at Duke, some of the other ones that they had early. I mean, this is a very, very good basketball team with a lot of talent, and they're working through some things like we are and like a lot of the other teams in the country are right now. But the teams that have a prideful group, I know they do, I know we do, you keep battling, and hopefully the switch will flip, and you can get on a roll.
Do you think teams will try to go to school on Ohio State's tape and just, try to shove you around and be physical the way they were? Because, they got away with some things in that game, too. So do you think other teams will try to do that?
Well, I think some of it is just, it's the makeup of your group. That's who Ohio State is. That's what makes them who they are. And we talked about that in the 2 days we had to prepare, that you got to be ready for a physical battle with them. And, you got to bring your hard hat to that game. If you don't, you're going to get exactly what happened to us. So, I think a lot depends on the makeup of the group. Michigan State is a physical basketball team. They've got skill, all over the floor with their perimeter guys, and they can take you inside as well. And that's, been the makeup of Tom Izzo's teams, going back 25 years, is they are tough, hard-nosed, fast, rebounding. So those are going to be big parts of our game plan. We have to get back in transition, and we have to battle them on the glass. If we do those two things, we will hopefully have a chance.
Kevin Suits.
Happy New Year, Fred. You guys played on Thanksgiving, you played on Christmas, and now here it's New Year's Day, and you're preparing for a game tomorrow. Does it even seem like a holiday to you guys today? And what does your schedule look like on a day like this?
Yeah, to answer your question, no, it really doesn't. I rang in the New Year, went going to bed at about 9:45 last night, just not sleeping much the previous 2 nights. So, we came in here early. We got our COVID testing done early, watched film with our players, and then went out and had a good, crisp, kind of walk-through type practice. We went really hard yesterday. After getting back at about midnight, we brought them in there, and, I told them, if we're not going to bring it in the game, we're going to get it out of you in practice. And they came in and they competed. So today we backed off, and they're sore, they're ornery, as we all are right now when you go through what we're going through. But, we felt that was the best thing to do yesterday because we didn't guard the ball. We didn't close out with urgency. We didn't battle their posts the way we needed to. So we tried to simulate all that in a practice, shortly after we got back at midnight. So today was all about trying to get them back, have a good mental day. We still did go up and down a little bit, but just try to prepare them and keep them fresh so we can go out there and hopefully have our legs. So, it's to answer your question, does it feel like a holiday? No, none of them have to this point. When you play on the holidays like we have with Thanksgiving, Christmas, and now New Year's, you just try to stick with the task at hand and get your team prepared to go out and play, which I give our guys credit. It's such an unusual year, and you're playing on holidays. Normally you're spending with your families. I give our guys credit for preparing the right way and going out and doing everything we're asking of them right now in a very difficult time.
So think about 3 more. I got Jacob Padilla.
With Derek's suspension almost coming to an end, how do you handle his practice reps as far as playing with the scout team versus kind of getting incorporated with the top units?
Yeah, we're still having him. He was on the scout team. We're doing extra work right now with Derek and some of the other guys, bringing them in either early or after practice, where we're getting them reps with our offense. And we obviously the last week we've gotten him a lot more reps with the guys that he's going to be playing with here, starting in our next game at Purdue. He's been phenomenal. Derek, the last year and a half, getting close to 2 years, has done everything we've asked him to do. And, he had the disappointment of what he thought going into the season. He would either have a short suspension or no suspension. And then, basically it was the same as it would have been in a normal year. So he struggled with that early, but, he's really getting excited about getting back out there. Now, we can't expect Derek to come back the minute he steps on the floor, and all of a sudden now everything changes because we have Derek Walker back. It's going to take him some time sitting as long as he has to get his timing right, to get his conditioning right. But he will help. There's no question, because of his ability to finish and give us a threat in the paint. And we're all excited to get him out there as coaches, and certainly his teammates are excited to get him back out there. But, it's going to take him a little time to get him to where he wants to be and where we need him to be.
Sipple?
Just Fred, quick follow, really simple one. How do you feel about your point guard play?
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at what Delano's done as far as numbers-wise. He's putting up really good numbers. He struggled in the last game, obviously, with his shooting. He had been shooting it at a pretty solid clip, for where he was in the past, and he's really worked hard at it. And when he has an open one, we expect him to shoot it, and we expect him to make it. As far as our pace numbers, possession length is really good from where we want it. I think we're second in the nation right now in big schools in possession length. But, at times we don't come down with the organization maybe that we need. And again, I put that more on me. We had a guy sitting out in Delano last year and a guy, Trey, that played mostly off the ball his first 2 years at Pitt. And, Kobe is kind of the third guy that gives us minutes at the point as well. So, it's about coming down, recognizing, understanding where guys are. If somebody gets it going in the flow to try to get the ball back. We did a phenomenal job with Teddy in that, with the Michigan game, especially in that first half. But for the most part, with, having a guy that didn't play a year ago and having another guy that really hadn't had much experience at the point, I've been, for the most part, pleased with our point guards.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
Last question, Robin Washut.
Hey, kind of speaking about the rotation, you guys played 9 guys, at least 7 minutes last time out, and then you're adding another one in a couple games with Derek. Ideally, do you eventually want to pare down that rotation to a certain number, or is that still very much in flux, just kind of given the nature of your roster right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's the hardest part of being a coach is distributing the minutes. So you want to see every single guy on your roster be successful. And the reality with when you have 13 scholarship players, usually you play 8 or 9, and try to get everybody else to accept what their roles are, and if they get thrown into the game, go out and take advantage of it. What I saw leading into the Ohio State game, our second group, they were phenomenal, and they played great basketball, and I thought they deserved opportunity to be out there on the floor. And that's how it's going to continue to be. When we have disappointing, whether it's a loss or a disappointing effort, to get the guys that practice well opportunity, and then whoever plays best is going to be on the floor at the end. So, right now we've just got a group and everybody's, going out there and competing and fighting for those quality minutes, and then especially at the end of games. And we're still searching for who is the right group to be in there at the end. And really right now it's going to be the players that are producing and giving us the best chance.
Thank you, guys.
The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday Morning Show, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Cranack.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Great to be back with you. It's Hour 2. It's Weekend Edition. Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Mark Cranack, Elijah Herbal. Good stuff from Coach Hoiberg as Nebraska gets ready for Sparty tonight. And we are watching kind of through the creaks of our hand here, afraid to get a full look. See if Nebraska basketball can get things turned around. That was a woofer the other night against Ohio State. College football is alive and well. Really impressive win by Ohio State over Clemson last night. And we'll spend some time on Nebraska football for 2021. We welcome in the managing editor with HailVarsity.com and magazine, Brandon Vogel. Also author with John Cook as Husker Volleyball set to go smoke some people here in the coming weeks. Dream Like a Champion, the book with John Cook and Brandon Vogel. Can follow Brandon on Twitter at Brandon L. Vogel. Vogues, Happy New Year, or Merry New Year, as Eddie Murphy said. What's up, man?
Not a whole lot. Happy New Year to you guys as well. I appreciate this call. So now that I now know it's Saturday. Feels like the first time in about 9 days that I know what day it is.
That's the same here, because it's all been kind of a blur. I've watched a little football. I've spent a lot of time in the gym. It hasn't mattered because my food choices have not been great. I've just been counteracting. But I got a kick out of this, and there's so many parody accounts that exist on Twitter. And I sent this to you guys. We started the show off as we returned to 2021 with Lars Anderson's tip of the cap to Nebraska football, helping pave the way for Ohio State's demolishing of Clemson last night. Well, the arrogant Ryan Day Twitter account is beautiful, especially the bio on it. But we're either waiting or some of us have received our $600 stimulus, and arrogant Ryan Day wants us to know that the $600 stimulus, if you can picture this in your mind, is Trevor Lawrence on his back after getting smoked last night. And the $2,000 stimulus is just a picture of a healthy, wonderful Mr. Fields. And there's your difference between the $600 and the $2,000 stimulus. So, Vogues, I mean, hey, Nebraska was tied with 3.5 minutes left against Ohio State in their first half, so Nebraska's not too far away from Clemson, right?
That was my takeaway. I thought
that was so good.
So when those opening lines came out for those playoff games, I was like, it seems like Ohio State might be getting undervalued here a little bit, but in no way did I foresee what was actually going to happen, what we saw unfold last night. I mean, and I think there was something to it was just hard to know what to make of the Buckeyes because of the 6 games thing. Now, should Dabo have ranked them 11? No. And he is getting roasted. It's been a fun, 14 hours on Twitter because, why do that? Why give them that? Mm-hmm. Even if you're trying to take a philosophical stand of, I think it's important that the teams that played more games are ranked higher, fine. Just don't do it. Don't do it for a week. Nobody cares about the coach's poll anyway. I could not believe that not only did he do that, knowing it would be public, but then took questions on it and talked about it. And then, hey, when Ohio State comes out and beats you, well, you got to deal with that part of it too. So Happy New Year.
It is, and there's some comments from Dabo, and he's kind of stuck to his guns there, but they were very matter of fact between Lawrence and Dabo last night in their post game, just about the butt kicking that was handed out by Ohio State. Vogues and Krenek, I'll let you jump in. Sorry about that, but you just saw. We talk about motivation, right, when it comes to bowl games, and you had it kind of reminded me of Nebraska. Just the heartache they felt in '93 with the Florida State Bowl loss in the '94 Orange Bowl, and then that unfinished business mantra, right, where all year you were working towards this goal to get back at it and claim what you thought was yours. You had a similar mentality with Ohio State. You just had COVID and Big Ten leadership thrown into the mix, which was a whole different beast. But really, it was Ohio State wanted one more dance with Clemson. They wanted one more shot to take down the team that they thought, man, we had a great game last year, and some things didn't go our way. We just fell short. I give them so much credit because Ohio State kind of, a lot of credit goes to Northwestern, but they just didn't, they kind of limped towards the end. But man, when the lights were on, they were incredible last night with their run game, with their emphasis on the run. And then everyone's kind of been questioning Fields about his throwing ability. Is he injured? He's looked kind of shaky. Well, he was phenomenal last night throwing the play action. Can you take notes on this if you're a Nebraska football fan when it comes to setting up the run to get downfield with your passing game? I'm asking for several friends.
I would hope so, because you look at it and it may end up being a pretty powerful lesson for Ohio State. You know, they got tested by Indiana, but were pretty comfortable in most of their Big Ten games. I mean, you think back to that first game that they played against Nebraska, and Fields was able to do whatever he wanted. You know, Nebraska was super cautious in pass defense to try and not give up. I mean, when Justin Fields can throw the ball from his 38 to the 1 yard line, you see why you kind of try to keep everything in front and live to fight another down. But that Northwestern game, with the way it unfolded, I mean, I wasn't thinking about Ohio State's run game pretty much at all. Like, I mean, we know they're talented. We know they're talented on the offensive line, and they have talented backs. But it was like, it just wasn't a factor. Northwestern forcing them to be like, we're just going to give the ball to Trey Sermon and let him go because it's what's working here, may have been the perfect lesson at the perfect time. And you know, Ryan Day took not a lot, but took some heat during that game for not going to the run game sooner. But credit to him now, I mean, because they certainly came out and did it against Clemson, the best team they've faced so far this year. So it speaks well, I think, of Ryan Day and that coaching staff. And hey, hat tip to the Wildcats, because they may have given Ohio State just what they needed. We'll see. You know, this Alabama game is, of course, going to be tough, but at least you're there. You've given yourself a shot.
You know, it's interesting to bring this back to Nebraska, the idea of run the ball. That was sort of frowned upon in the Mike Riley years. Like, oh, shut up. That's old school. It's not the 90s anymore. You got to be able to put it up and throw the ball all over the field. There seems to have been a return of the notion in Nebraska circles of, no, run the ball. Run it.
It's a T-shirt.
I mean, really, it's found a resurgence. And when you look back on 20 years of Nebraska trying to find this passing attack, you basically have Quincy Enunwa as the only bona fide NFL player at wide receiver. You know, seriously, that's it. That's pretty much the only guy who has stuck in the league for any length of time. Now, I know you had some practice squad guys, but for the most part, that's it. In 20 years of trying, it doesn't work. Here. Anyways, do you think that when you boil it down, that is Nebraska's number one thing they have to figure out? Out of all the things they have to figure out, and there's a great series on hailvarsity.com right now breaking down all kinds of different things, but effectively running the ball, would you put that as number one or 1A? Where would that rank for you?
I think it's number one. It was kind of number one for me going into 2019, when things certainly looked like they were irrefutably on the upswing, like you expected Nebraska to make progress from how it finished 2018. But you lost a couple key members on the O-line, and you lost Divina Zigbo. So going into that season, I was like, the one thing that could derail Nebraska here is if they aren't as able to run the ball as they were over the final, basically the back half of that 2018 season. And they weren't. Like, they were super reliant on the quarterback run game. And the crazy thing about 2020, when you brought all your offensive linemen back and your primary ball carrier back, was that it felt much the same. So I think it's at the top of the list for me, and it's not all that close because everything kind of with this offense, I think, snaps together from there. Like, if you have that run game working and can be not just consistent, but also a bit more of a big play threat that way. And I'm like taking out quarterbacks here whatsoever. Like, you want that to be a facet of your offense, but it can't be the primary way you move the ball on the ground. Because, part of the reason you could, until Northwestern forced the issue with Ohio State, you could kind of forget about the Buckeyes run game was, well, Justin Fields can sit back there and complete 22 of 24 passes. Nebraska can't do that right now. And it's probably never going to be able to, like, Ohio State receiver talent is off the charts and has been for like 4 or 5 years now. Nebraska is going to have a hard time matching that in recruiting. It doesn't mean they can't get some of those guys, but you have to have that run threat to be able to then, I think, open up the big play passing game, because just bombing it downfield 60 yards and, Fields made some amazing throws last night, but there were also some great catches, and there also wasn't a ton of room on some of those touchdown passes. It's going to be a while before Nebraska can do that. The much easier way to kind of progress here is to really hone in and develop that ground game.
Brandon Vogel's with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Brandon, I want to zoom out a little bit and look at the Big Ten as a whole, because it's been a great bowl season for them. Still undefeated, and then you have Ohio State advancing to the college football championship game. So when you're just looking at the Big Ten as a whole right now, is it the best, most competitive conference in football? I know the SEC has held that crown for a long time. And then just as a quick follow-up to that, do you see any teams being able to come up to Ohio State's level and maybe challenge for the Big Ten? Just because there is a lot of talent in the Big Ten right now, but it seems like nobody can get over that hump and beat Ohio State.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conference to kind of step back and look at, and I think it's 1 and 1A between the Big Ten and the SEC in terms of just the grind it puts on those teams, and really the biggest difference so far might be that the SEC's reputation for being that has been cemented for a decade or more. Meanwhile, it's a relatively new development in the Big Ten. But and the other big difference, and you hit on it, is it's still Ohio State and everybody else. Like in the SEC, Alabama, yes, has earned everything it's gotten and more. But you'll still see a Hugh Freeze-led Ole Miss jump up and get them. LSU had a magical year a year ago. So. Who is that other team? So far, Wisconsin has been the closest one. And I think some of this comes down to style as well, because consistently, Northwestern might be that third team. And, of course, Penn State's in there as well. Penn State's the team that has the talent to go on a kind of LSU-like run, But you look at Northwestern never gets the credit it's due, I think in part because of how it plays, and also because it doesn't have those kind of singular playmakers on the outside. Northwestern for the past 4 years has had 3 of the best linebackers in the country, but you just kind of take it for granted. You're like, well, yeah, Pat Fitzgerald, he's a linebacker. You can get linebackers at Northwestern. So I think all of that kind of contributes to the Big Ten maybe not getting full credit for just how tough it is on a week-to-week basis. But you get more results like this, more results like we've seen from the bowl game so far. And I think they gain ground a little bit on the SEC each time out.
Brandon Vogel's with us, weekend edition, Hail Varsity Radio. Vogues, want to go over to some of your thoughts on HailVarsity.com's chat with Bill Moose. I saw a little bit of that this morning, getting ready, and kind of run just a couple bullet points and takeaways from you. I know folks can log on and subscribe. It's a great price point for the magazine and the digital subscription for Hail Varsity. But it was cool to get caught up with the Moose and what are some things he's looking at? Because that's kind of where we're all at right now. What's 2021 look like for Nebraska football once things are figured out with who's coming back, who's gone? Is there an identity that's established? And, that schedule could be very awesome from a home game standpoint, but very, very trying. So I'm sure the Moose had some really cool thoughts.
Yeah, he did. And credit to Derek Peterson. He was able to get nearly an hour with Bill Moose. So we'll have plenty more from that conversation. They touched on just about everything. It's sort of a year in review type of thing. Listening to Moose talk about kind of the football program is always illustrative. I think it's about where I kind of expected him to be at based on, previous comments, but he was pretty decisive in the way that he worded what's the difference between Nebraska football now, and Nebraska football when you showed up. And,
sure.
He was like, better players further along. It hasn't shown up on the field yet, like a lot of Husker fans. You keep hearing about kind of penalties and the mistakes, and it's you kind of bang your head against the wall a little bit because everybody can point to eliminate some of this stuff, and it'd be a lot easier to see what everyone's talking about internally. But it's going to be another 8 months before you get a chance to do that. So it was just good to catch up with him. We haven't put this up there yet, but Moose had some interesting thoughts on the spring game, so that'll be coming out next week, and also some really interesting comments on kind of the name, image, likeness
cool
legislation that's kind of working itself out right now. So look for that in future dates. But so far, it's just kind of good to reset and be like, well, here's the boss, so to speak. Like, what are your thoughts on Nebraska football as we turn the corner to 2021?
Brandon Vogel with us on Hail Varsity Radio. And I think maybe the thing, if you're a fan right now, that you're just sort of grappling with is you probably didn't expect this many red flags in year 3, right? There's just quite a few red flags with the program right now where you're just like, good Lord, that's going to get fixed, right? As you go into this coming year, go into year 4, and you look at the schedule, which, hey, you got all those big teams, the big name kind of competitive teams in the Big Ten. You got them all coming to Lincoln, so that's what you would want. If you're going to have them on the schedule, you want them coming to Lincoln. But if it doesn't go well, like if you're looking at a 4-8 or a 3-9 in year 4, do you think, just where you're sitting right now, do you think Moose and Frost both would survive that if that happens in year 4?
I think they would get through one more season, but at that point, like it would be clear, because right now there seems to be a little bit of a divide for those that are outside of Nebraska. Just looking at it, they can say, well, Scott Frost ends up on hot seat lists from national, college football writers for a reason, because like you look at the results so far and. Yeah, that you would be there in a normal situation. I get no sense that, and Moose kind of in his conversation with Derek was along the same lines, which is where he's been the whole time. Like this is not a 3-year thing. It was never designed to be that. Now, a bit surprised that you haven't seen. It's so much more unclear at this point than I think almost anyone thought it would be. I remember. In 2016, talking to an AAC assistant coach. So that was the year UCF went 6-7, and it was towards the end of that season. And in hearing him, like, yeah, UCF, they're gonna be a problem. Like that team is a lot better. And it was right away. And I know Urban Meyer said that after that 2018 Ohio State game, but that feeling seems to, I don't know if it's gone if it was never really there. But it's not there now. And I think that's kind of, if you boil all this down, like, well, you got to cut out the untimely penalties and you got to flip the turnover margin. Yes, you got to do all those things. But it's just, what do you have to hang your hat on at this point? In 2020, feeling a lot like a run back of 2019 in terms of both like the successes you saw, but also some of the limitations. It certainly didn't help in that regard. But, Nebraska needs to it needs to show some progress on the field. I think everyone has kind of reached their limit with kind of reading between the lines and some detailed accounting to say, well, if you want to think that Nebraska is making progress, here are some ways you can do that, because you can find those things. But into year 4, it's got to start showing up in terms of actual wins and losses.
Yeah.
Brandon Vogels. Yep.
Sorry to jump in here, Chris. I am not at all comparing what Frost has gotten done to the latter years of Callahan or the latter years of Riley. Like, big difference, in my opinion. Those were teams that, especially if you look at some of those scores in Riley's last year, some of the scores in Callahan's last year, like complete losing of the team, right? Or at least one side of the ball was just completely inept. I don't think you're looking at that. I don't think you're looking at that kind of scenario, but you got to figure out something.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And I think the other thing it underscores for me as kind of looked at this big picture is, it's kind of impossible to know exactly where Nebraska was at the end of 2017. I mean, everyone could look at it and be like, yeah, this isn't how it's supposed to look. But really, and this isn't trying to make an excuse, it's just kind of asking the question, like, how far behind was Nebraska at that point? Like, if you did a true accounting, like if you talked to assistant coaches throughout the country to get their unvarnished take, like, what was their read on Nebraska? How much ground was there to make up? And that contributes to this, because it's kind of impossible to know that.
We don't know the starting point. And you need to be, wherever the starting point is, you can't be committing penalties. You can't be scoring 23 points a game in the Big Ten. You can't be at least reluctant to forge forward if the run game's working. You can't be wondering who's going to be carrying the football once your JUCO guy leaves, if he's leaving. I mean, you've had control of the program this long enough to not have some of those issues, Vogues, and that's kind of the conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and you look at, Team Green made the decision to enter the transfer portal, and you look at it, it's been pretty hit or miss on the junior college front. You've had a couple of guys, but for those kind of immediate fix type of players, I mean, that's why you bring them in. Nebraska hasn't had as much success through these 3 seasons as you maybe would have hoped or thought. Like, you get a couple of those to work out the way you think they were when you're recruiting guys, and maybe it's a little bit different, but yeah, you want to boil 2020 down, like you said, that 23 points, you better be like Northwestern level and give it up 14 if you're going to win that way. And we know that's not how Nebraska wants to do it.
Vogues, this was fun, man. Great to get caught up with you in the new year. We'll do this again soon, and have a great weekend of more football, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, Brandon Vogel with us on Hail Varsity .com and magazine.
Look, man, I was just trying to look ahead and just be like, yeah, what happens if Nebraska's actually 4-8 or 3-9?
Listen.
Right,
people will freak. Okay, people will freak. People will be disinterested. Here's the other part of it, and this is not to sugarcoat 3-9 or 4-8. Okay, you can have a 3-9 a year ago, like Northwestern did, as far as you're in every game. But the reason is your offense was god-awful, and then you jump to this year for Northwestern because you got a fixed offensive coordinator and quarterback, right, to complement your defense. But you can't have a 3-9 or 4-8 at Nebraska and not have changes. I'm not talking about the head coach, but I'm talking about guys that are under you. Okay, you can't. And I hate saying that because it's not personal, but you can't with this schedule. I mean, if you pull off 6 or 7 wins next year, that's nuts. You're going to have to win a lot of close games again, and that's not been a forte of yours. So you just got to be better at not screwing yourself, and that goes into why you're at 3-5 this year, or from a game plan standpoint, or not overthinking it, or just being able to go execute and go be accepting of winning a certain way. And that's if you're going to run the football to win the game, then you got to run the football to win the game with the same running back. I mean, it just that's what this domino is to me, this domino effect.
And yeah, I kind of don't like, I don't want to buy into the whole thing of, your system needs years to finally entrench. It's not a system, right, that you need to worry about. It's more about just the general principles of what you're about. Because Wisconsin's had a few different offensive coordinators. They've had a few different defensive coordinators running, somewhat different systems. It's not like there's a specific system. There's been turnover
with the same result, and that's 9 or 10 wins.
Yeah, well, right, and but it's because they're underscored by principles more than they are a system, right? It's like on defense, we're going to absolutely get after the quarterback. We're absolutely going to stop the run. Period. End of story. And that's it, right?
The Godfather's watching practice every day, and you're going to do what he wants if you're going to be hired here.
Offense, we are going to run the ball, period. Like, that is happening. No matter what system you want to install around it to get that done. And I just hope that Coach Frost and or Lubick or whoever's running the offense is not so in love with the system that they're kind of losing sight of the end goal, right? Like, the system is only a means to get to a W, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Right? Let's get the Iron Horse on. Gary Sharp's up next. It's Hail Varsity Weekend, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Glad to have you back.
Yes, sir. You heard me right.
Here are the guys, Schmidt and Kranak.
Well, Hector, here's the game plan. You're going to bring us 2 absolute martinis. You know how I like them, straight up. And then precisely 7.5 minutes after that, you're going to bring us 2 more. Then 2 more after that every 5 minutes until one of us passes out.
Excellent strategy, sir.
Weekend edition, back with you. It's Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. We will be back to Hail Varsity Radio at 4 on Monday. Myself and Elijah excited after a little bit of a breather. We welcome in the Iron Horse for another year. We say hi to Gary Sharp. Sharpie, Happy New Year, brother. How was your football Friday yesterday?
It was good. It was good, especially if you're a fan of the Big Ten and you dislike Dabo Swinney's mouth. He got a little karma paid. And it was kind of another bad day in Dallas for Irish Catholics.
Yeah, that didn't happen. Wow, man. So yeah, Notre Dame just not on the same planet as Bama. That's like most teams. Clemson got annihilated by Ohio State. Ohio State been waiting a whole year for that. As we bring it back to Nebraska, Sharpie, let's kind of zero in on the Big Red football. And, what are your hopes / resolutions here if you're making out a list here in your mind or on paper for Nebraska football 2021? There's still a lot up in the air with who's back, who's going. But, I mean, the schedule is what it is, and it's year 4. Can Coach Frost make a jump as a head coach, as a CEO, and get this program kind of flipped around so they're not doing the little things that turn into big things on Saturday?
Well, that's all part of the question, and moves that he makes before guys return and you sign the last recruiting class in February, I think says a lot about where the program is going or where Scott feels like where the program is. I caution people watching those 2 games yesterday, do not sit there and compare Nebraska to those 2 teams. They are on there's things those teams did, either Alabama, Clemson-Ohio State, which those 3 are in a group by themselves, and then there's Notre Dame, because those teams had discipline. You could see game plan development, getting the ball to the playmakers, adjustments at halftime, good situational football. They've also, tacked on top 10, top 15 recruiting classes.
Nebraska isn't looking at those teams that played yesterday, except for one team that played yesterday, Northwestern. What does Northwestern do well? They take care of the little things, those small details, the execution, the fundamentals, the focus, the lack of penalties, of fumbles and turnovers and things like that. And they play with great discipline that gives them a chance to stay on the field with Ohio State or beat Auburn like they did yesterday. And we're talking about Northwestern. I think those are the things. I think there's talent in Nebraska's program. I think there's plenty of talent in Nebraska's program. But it's the three things that I'm going to be very focused on going into 21, and it starts with the little things. Little things, attention to detail, that can change games so quickly in your own division, and that you have a culture that you can rely on. And I think you have that culture, but maybe you need to reinforce what that culture is. And I think, the attention to little things, whether it be the coaching, whether you make changes there or adjustments, or what you do on special teams, I think will say a lot about where Nebraska can go in the short term compared to the long term. Don't compare them to the playoff games yesterday. Compare them to Northwestern, because Northwestern has now passed Nebraska in the last couple of years inside of their own division.
Gary Sharp with us on Hail Varsity Radio. But, here we are after year 3, and there are significant doubts now. I mean, let's just call it what it is. Significant doubts about, is this going to happen? I think everybody was pretty sure, like, finally, when Coach Frost got hired, the general conventional wisdom was good. Okay, we'll get the strength and conditioning thing back on point. Offense is going to be on point. Nebraska will be in the fight. But here we are. What do you think has to happen in year 4 to keep this thing going? Because, Gary, I think if you end up like a 3-9 or a 2-10 or something, that's not going to be good.
Well, first, everybody has to treat the head coach of Nebraska as his name is Scott Frost. He has no connection to Nebraska. He didn't quarterback here in the 90s and win a national championship. Nebraska football, the program and the fan base expect a lot more than what they're getting right now. Better football, more consistent football, direction, hope, promise moving forward. And you're right, Mark. There is not a lot to hang your hat on in 2020. Just imagine if you're a season ticket salesperson for Nebraska. You had a season where nobody could come into the stands. There's a lot of excitement for the next time that Nebraska can open up the gates for a real game, and that's on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 when Buffalo plays here. Try picking up the phone and calling somebody, and they're getting questions on the other end about, okay, yeah, you're telling me you got a good home schedule because there's some really good opponents here, but why would I buy a season ticket? You're running out of selling hope. I mean, it's not like you can say, hey, we got this hotshot young quarterback, we got blah, 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 blah. We really have a lot more questions than we have answers, and I don't think you should be in that position in year number 4. I think some things can be corrected, but they're necessarily what I just mentioned. Little things, special teams, attention to detail, relying on your culture when things go wrong. If you can get those in place, then I think there's enough talent there. But what has changed, what I've really seen change this year compared to the previous 2 years is people wonder if Scott Frost's ceiling is 6 wins at a Power 5 level. And if that's the case, this isn't working. But I've said from the start that when Nebraska walks off the field on Black Friday against Minnesota later this year, there will be no doubts of where this program is going. It either is not going in the right direction, or there's at least something to say, okay, finally they've gotten over the hump and I can see something. Because right now, you're kind of like the weather outside here in Omaha and Lincoln. There's this ice fog that you can't really see through, and that's disappointing going into year 4.
Gary Sharp's with us on Hail Varsity Weekend. Sharpie, when you chalk up the inconsistency on offense, is it a matter of misses on, and I agree with you, I think there is talent in the program, but Nebraska's tried to go the JUCO route or reach for a specific type of recruit that's no longer here. Okay, you've had attrition. You've also, through no fault of your own, you didn't have spring football, and you had a stop and start, wait and see fall camp. Not an excuse, but a reality. When it comes to the development of the kids that you've brought in and where you want to go offensively, do you chalk it up to practice style with making corrections so there's not a false start, or you're more refined at getting an identity? Or do you go back to, okay, there's not been a lot of development time due to COVID, due to the stops and starts due to the lack of practice time with some of the skill guys, i.e. the running backs or wideouts. If you were to lean one way or the other for a reason why you're at 23 points a game in the Big Ten, is it lack of time together, or is it just not having it coached appropriately?
Wow, I know you have to be out the air at 9. There's a lot in there.
Well, just a quick thought.
It's not all about the quarterback, but it starts and stops there. You can't have turnovers out of that position like you do now. You have to have more of the good Adrian, which we've definitely seen. But we've also seen the bad Adrian. I also think you have to have an identity and a game plan development in getting your playmakers the ball in space, making adjustments at a halftime on that side of the ball, being good in situational football. All these things that, are kind of common that Nebraska seems to have issues with. I'll give Nebraska a little bit of a pass. I wonder what it would have been like with some of the younger wide receivers if they had a full spring practice, because a lot of those guys were here early. But that just puts a little bit more pressure on you that when you get to spring this year or you begin next year, that you should be okay, that you should not have these learning curves. You should not have these head-scratching things that are going on. It's a weird spot for a program to be in that everybody was excited about the hire, and now you're wondering, okay, where is Nebraska going? Because in the last 2 years, Minnesota and Northwestern has passed Nebraska. That can't happen. But then you have to ask the question, why has it happened? Well, look at what has helped in those programs. In one case, they've got an identity and a culture that they fall back on at Minnesota. They're going to be very physical. Northwestern, they're going to be very disciplined. Those are two things Nebraska doesn't have. Can they get those in the offseason before you play a football game in Ireland or, here in this country to open up the season?
Gary Sharp is with us on Hail Varsity Radio, and it's funny too. I think you also have to take this year with a grain of salt. I think a lot of us said that going into the year, where it's like weird year. Obviously, you got COVID all over the place. You got weird protocols. It's a strange season. You can't act like it's just normal. But at the same time, for as easy as it is to be negative because of the lack of results, look, Frost has lost 20 games since he's been here, 12 of those by a score or less. Right? So, when you look at that, you're just like, whew. If you're talking about, imagine if all of those 12 losses.
I'd take half.
Went the other way. You're looking at a team, then they're 24-8 under Frost, right? It's a totally different, completely different. Now, so what is it going to take to just flip those? Because look, losing 12 of 20 by a score or less says that you are actually not that far off. Yeah, right? So what's it going to take to just flip it to where instead of losing by a score or less, you're winning by a score or less?
Okay, a couple of things there. One, I'm going to disagree with you about Nebraska kind of getting a mulligan, and that's not exactly what you said, Mark, but this is going to allow me to get on my soapbox a little bit. I'll give Nebraska a little bit of a pass for not having spring ball because I think it would have benefited some guys that it took them a little bit later to develop. But Nebraska practiced throughout. Nebraska never shut down. They never had any starters miss games because of COVID. So that's on Nebraska. They practiced more than anybody else did in the Big Ten Conference once the season looked like it was going to start and then when it didn't start. To turn those games around, I hate going down this road because you can spin this narrative however you want. You could say, man, Notre Dame wasn't that bad last night. Look at the final score. Alabama could have walked off the field in the second half, and Notre Dame still would not have beaten them. What it comes back to in these close games, now, I can say, okay, if those close games, Mark, happened all at the beginning, and now they're not happening, okay, they learned their lesson. But why do those close losses for Nebraska keep happening? Discipline is missing in key games. Turnovers, costly penalties, game plan development, playmakers in space, halftime adjustments, situational football to put together with the talent that you have on your roster. I don't know if they can ever get those things aligned. And I also don't know, this will be a thing that they've got to figure out in the offseason, or they're just blowing smoke up of all of us about having good weeks of practice leading to Saturday. Because I don't know if you heard Urban Meyer after the game last night. He said that after Dabo Swinney made his comments about Ohio State, Ryan Day told him this, that they probably had their 3 best days of practice. For us around here, we would roll our eyes. For Ohio State, they understand that practice is one thing, and the only way to see that you've made improvement is what you do with that good practice on Saturday, because those are hollow words. Ohio State, they had 3 great days of practice. We saw what happened last night. They played one of their best games that they played as a program in a while. I think all of those things, I think there's a lot of things that are up in the air about Nebraska. But you know the thing about where Nebraska's at? And Nebraska's a long way away from the 4 that played in the playoff yesterday, and they're 4th in their own division, in my opinion. You could even make a case that they're 5th in their own division, and I would probably right now put them 5th. Is some of these things can be fixed on the fly, and they can be done in the calendar year. You don't have to say, okay, we got to wait for another recruiting class or so. But do they have the ability currently inside of the program to fix those things?
Gary Sharp's with us, Hail Varsity Weekend. Sharpie, a thought as we kind of switch gears to hoops. Big day in the Metro. Of course, Bell West and Millard North going to touch gloves. And in Nebraska basketball, a rough watch against Ohio State. Sparty comes to town. And what did your take on the Metro first? Just the landscape up in Omaha with high school hoops and Fred and company and what Nebraska's trying to do. They've got an identity. We talk about Nebraska football identity. Well, basketball's got an identity. The execution's a problem with it for sure, at least the last few games.
Metro Finals, a rematch of last year's state finals, should be a good one. Both teams are playing well. I've said watch out for Bell West. People said, man, you lost a lot from last year. Well, they might be a better team than they are this year. I think Millard North's on a mission. That should be a fun game tonight. Unfortunately, it's not inside of a packed arena in Omaha. It's inside of Creighton Prep's gym. Be honest, guys. How long did you stick around watching Nebraska-Ohio State the other night?
I made it through all of it. I mean, I watched all of it, but it was just like, Jesus, this is bad.
All right.
Here's the problem. I don't even know what to make of that, by the way, Gary. It's like college.
That was really, really bad basketball. I mean, to have only 3 assists. They have problems with their offense in terms of when they play it. I mean, when they get them into the half court, Nebraska looks like they're lost because they have areas where the ball just sticks. And I also think they try and run the pick and roll. Well, the guy that is rolling isn't having much success. So right now they're kind of lost on offense. I can see what they want to do, but it's painful right now to go almost a whole year without winning a Big Ten game, and now you got 2 teams that should be a good game tonight. I think Nebraska will respond, but the problem is Michigan State has to respond.
Yeah.
I mean, you got 2 desperate teams playing tonight. I actually think it'll be a highly entertaining game. I think Nebraska will respond a lot better than they did in Columbus. That doesn't mean they're going to win, but they've got some issues that they have to fix out. They got to get guys that are more comfortable playing with each other. And I don't know in the Big Ten if that'll let you do it, because the Big Ten, boy, if you are sloppy and you are not dialed in, they are going to expose you this year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned the ball sticking. God, what is it going to take for Nebraska to field a team under any coach with any players with just beautiful, crisp ball movement? Like, is that illegal? Can that happen?
The space in Nebraska? The space. I mean, here's the thing, man. Just a quick take on it, guys. I mean, Fred was brilliant with how he set up and did the blueprint with Iowa State with the ability to go get transfers and JUCO kids, and his system can work, right? But everyone's kind of jumped on what he started, and now when it comes to the talent you're bringing in, I think they're a more talented team than last year's kids, but they're giving you the same result, and they've looked worse. So I don't have an answer, and there's no contingency. All right, if you're 0 for 50 from 3, and I'm exaggerating here, there's not exactly anyone you can throw it down on the block to go get you 2. I mean, I've got nothing for you as far as
they're a little bit of a hodgepodge team. That's a work in progress, but and then this became the debate after the performance the other night is Frost against Hoiberg. Fred's done it at this level before. Fred is, so they'll give him the benefit of the doubt. a little bit more. I just think it's going to be a rough year because of the Big Ten, and I think Nebraska's trying to figure everything out with all the pieces they have. You can't retool your roster again in the offseason like he's done the last 2 years. You have to find a way to work with these guys, but you have to find a way that you're comfortable playing in the half court, because if not, you're going to have more cases like Wisconsin and Ohio State and Michigan the last 3 outings.
Sharpie, have a great weekend. Have a good call, and thanks for jumping on with us. Always fun to chat.
Hey, thanks, boys. Happy New Year, everybody.
You too, bud. Take care. That's Gary Sharp with this weekend edition. Hail Varsity Radio. Mark Cranack, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbal. Cranack, another year, brother. It's good to get back with you in January, and we'll have more ball to talk next Saturday. How's that sound?
Let's make it happen in 2021, man.
Let's
do it.
It's the T-shirt. Elijah, good to see
if
you.
Either of the men's programs could get W's this
There's
year.
volleyball, and thank God there's Will Bowl.
Yeah.
All right. Enjoy the weekend. Back at you Monday, 4 o'clock with Hail Varsity Radio. Enjoy a full NFL day tomorrow. More college football later today on ESPN Lincoln.